Okay, so we're live with another SaaS founder interview. I'm here with Andrew Michael today, CEO and co-founder of Avrio. Andrew, welcome to the chat. Lovely to have you here. Can you introduce yourself, tell us a bit about who you are and what you do?
Thanks, Peter. It's great to be on. So as you mentioned, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Avrio. Essentially what we do at Avrio is we help you transform your customer conversations, data analysis, and scattered knowledge into insights that can help you drive growth for your business. So we have a combination of a repository and analysis tools that allow you to upload user recordings, create highlights, tag, as well as a browser extension that essentially allows you to save information from across your tool stack. So if you're working in Mixpanel, Amplitude for data analytics, you can quickly and easily save that into the repository and share findings with your team. And then there's other few bells and whistles, like in terms of promotion and things that really help for discovery that traditional repositories or things like Notion or Confluence just fall short on.
Great. Sounds like a really useful tool for a lot of people in the group, a lot of SaaS founders who want more, the ability to gather more customer information and work with that data. How did you come across this issue or challenge, and how did that lead towards building Avrio yourself?
Yeah, so actually the problem I faced it myself personally, I was previously head of business intelligence at Hotjar, analytics and feedback. And I joined Hotjar when there was around 20 to 30 employees at the time. The company grew really, really fast during that period while I was there. And as we started to grow, we hit like the 80 mark, 80 to 90 mark. We started noticing that research was happening in silos. Teams weren't communicating effectively. We were repeating the same work over and over. And good information was just going to waste as well. So it actually started just internally. Said one quarter, like we really need to fix this as a problem, and just started seeing what was out there, like seeing how other people were solving the problem, how they were going about it. And it always came back to the same thing, like we either use Notion, Confluence, or Airtable. And they always came with the same buts, but it didn't work because of X, Y, and Z. So yeah, just from there, just decided, okay, like there must be a better way and let's go out and build it.
Did you find that you had a different information in different tools? Was it difficult to kind of work with that?
Yeah, so I mean, the first like where it really hit home to me was obviously we had the business intelligence team, like we had built a really sophisticated data stack and we were producing really, really good research reports, like going deep into things like the ideal customer profile or churn. And then it happened like one quarter, we were doing planning. Hotjar was using OKRs, like objectives and key results. And essentially what I was noticed, because I had a vantage point to work with a lot of different teams, I would go in and see what they were doing. And essentially the product team had put together a Confluence page with each of their objectives. They had pulled in insights from different tools. So they had analytics from Mixpanel, they had some quotes from customer conversations, and they'd packaged this nicely into a Confluence page. But it was really great that they did this and it was good work that was done. But ultimately it just stayed in that silo and only product had that information at their fingertips, where as a company, we were all going after the same objectives and we all had the same key results, just we had different ways of influencing those metrics. Like I said, okay, why does nobody else know about this? Like we need to get this out. And the other thing was that a lot of the stuff that was in that page, like the team that I was leading, the business intelligence team, had done a lot of that research in a lot more depth. But nobody had gone to the slide deck on page 56 where that insight was lying. They had to go and redo that work and retry and understand. There was no easy way for them to search and find. So yeah, that was essentially it.
Great. Okay, so if you're in SaaS and you're doing customer interviews, collecting customer information, and you want to make sure that there's transparency across the team for that, definitely check out Avrio. It's a really awesome tool for that. I'm sure that can help. Andrew, what I wanted to ask you a little bit about is your experience building that company, and if there was anything that really was able to give you a big leap forward during the challenge of building and the early stages of scaling a SaaS.
Yeah, so I think like for us, probably one of the big factors that helped a lot, and we can talk about the podcast in a bit as well, but I launched a podcast before I launched the business. So about 3 years ago, I was a previous startup founder, having started 3 companies, built 4 products. And when I joined Hotjar, actually at the time, like David was advisor to the previous company we had sold. And he's like, why not come to Hotjar, see how things are being done. And when you're ready, you can get started again. So I wanted to get started. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I said, let me build a podcast and build an audience first. And then when I have an audience, like I can sell to them and I can start, I don't like start from zero. And so I launched Churn.fm, essentially where we focus on churn and retention, how the fastest growing businesses are using it to fuel their growth, the retention to fuel their growth. And essentially, like, a happy accident that came out of it was that we ended up raising some pre-seed capital around $700,000. The round closed in about a week, and 6 of the 8 investors were guests of the show previously. So although I didn't anticipate this to be the outcome when starting the podcast, and it was just about building an audience, it really, really gave me a head start and gave the company a head start, being able to have this network. And the great thing as well is they're all startup founders. They all have their own companies. Not only does the funding help, but now from the networking, from joint webinars, being able to sort of leverage and tap into the networks is another huge, huge benefit that we've been lucky to have.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, that's the power of kind of building some community around what you're doing, and it seems to lend itself really well to your product. So I'm a subscriber to Churn.fm, and I love the show. Listen to a whole bunch of interviews there. I noticed that you talk mostly about churn, and there's so many interesting stories that founders come onto your podcast with to talk about how they tackle churn or things that have made a difference for them. Could you relay any of the insights that you've learned doing that show? What are some of the biggest things that SaaS founders listening can do, or at least consider, about churn that they might be experiencing, and how to think about resolving that?
Yeah, I think one of the premises of the show is really there is no sort of one size fits all. And that's where I started the podcast, was that so often you might read blog posts of how we discovered a magical number and we solved for churn, the famous Facebook 7 friends in 5 days or whatever. But really, churn is such a nuanced problem with so many different inputs that influence their final output metric. There's not one size that fits all, but a couple of stories that maybe come to mind, or probably one of the more interesting ones, I think, was an interview we did with Eleanor Dorfman at the time, was at Segment. And Segment, what they had realized early on was initially it was a self-serve product. You could go in and get started on your business plan and sign up and just start paying and get started with Segments. And quite early on, what they started noticing was that churn was just really, really bad. And after doing their own research and trying to dig into the numbers and understand why, what they found out was that the audience and the group that started with a good tracking plan and having a good structure in the way they're going about setting up segments were the most successful customers. And the ones that had just got started and adding events and just trying to move really quickly were the ones that ended up churning and the least successful. So they actually added a level of friction to their onboarding process, which most people in most stories you hear is get them through as fast as possible, show them the value as quickly as possible. But their level of friction was really okay, now if you're going to sign up for a business plan, you get on a call with a CSM, we set up a tracking plan for you, we make sure we set goals of what you want to be tracking, what you're trying to achieve, and we help you get set up for success, because we know if you have a good tracking plan, you have good clean data, that's what's going to make you stick with the product. So I think that was a step change for them in terms of churn and retention, which I think is always a very, very interesting story to come back to.
Yeah, I love that one. It does sound a little counterintuitive to the average story that you hear about reducing friction during churn. And I just found it interesting. It seems that at that stage in the life cycle, right at the beginning, getting the customer to think more about the impact of using the software, the how to get set up properly, what they want to get out of it, makes that whole life cycle a bit more intentional. Their use with the product more intentional, and gives them a lot more saying power. Absolutely,
and it's definitely there's 2 phases as well within the product. So the first is sort of the adoption, what is the jobs that they're hiring your product to do to begin with? How can you make sure you get them there? But what is the end state that you want to get them to? But then also things change, priorities change, and goals change, and the use cases for your product changes. So the way we see onboarding today, it's sort of this fixed period of time, the first week or 2 weeks within the product lifecycle. But essentially, you constantly need to be onboarding your customers to new features, to up skilling them, and trying to evolve as they evolve, because your level of sophistication when you start an email marketing on day one is completely different to the level of sophistication you have when you're doing email marketing a year from now, and the tools and the services and that. So I think that's also another interesting aspect when we think about onboarding, is that it's this continuous process, and it's not just a one and done moment in time, but it's really about, what do we need to educate our users to do now to like at this part of their journey to get the most out of our tool or service.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Yeah, it just goes to show how it's not really something that you set at the beginning and you can forget about it later on. You've got to kind of keep revisiting this and understanding the challenges and the situation context around what your customer is doing throughout their life cycle. Hey, you told us another interesting story about, I think you referred to it as the $1 million bug. Could you tell us about that story as well?
Yeah, so actually this was one of the most recent episodes, and I think that's what's fresh off the back of my mind when we chatted, is Christian Vickland from UnitQ. We were discussing like the reason for building the current company that they do, and they had previously a B2C company where they had millions of users on a daily basis. The app was used around the world, and the one big mistake they were making as a company is they were only analyzing user feedback in English. Like they were using it as a source to try and improve the product. And what they completely missed was feedback coming in from a Polish market where basically like all the feedback was like, your app is shit, it doesn't work, like this uninstall, but nobody paid attention to it. And eventually like he realized this by actually going through to G2 Crowd and seeing, okay, why are we getting like 1 stars in this Polish market and everywhere else like we're getting raving reviews? And what ended up happening was they just found out that the product wasn't working in a specific market. And the reason why it was $1 million bug is after fixing that, like the next 12 months, they ended up generating almost that in revenue, like 900,000 euros in revenue from the Polish market. So there's a lot of these cases where like something unseemingly like you don't think it's significant or it's not important can make a really, really big difference and impact at the end of the day.
Yeah, I love that story. It's almost like they missed it and then uncovered a kind of a source of a lot of ARR revenue for the business. Cool. I love hearing those stories about churn. It's been great to hear a bit about what you're doing, what your product does, how that helps companies and specifically SaaS companies too with their customer development. What are your plans, Andrew, for your business as you keep growing Avrio?
Yeah. So I think, I mean, obviously that's the plan is to continue growing Avrio. For us, like now, we actually literally last week rolled out this new version, which gives you the ability to upload and transcribe interviews and to be able to pull out insights to share with your team. We've got an exciting roadmap lined up for the next year that could end up taking us the next decade the way we want to do. But essentially what we want to do is like create a platform where information discovery becomes ubiquitous. You find information before you know you need it. And as you're going on your discovery and research process, because of our browser extension and web app, we're able to push information to you in timely moments. So like a good example of this is you could be analyzing a report in Mixpanel, and because we understand the context, we understand the metrics that you're looking at, we can search through the repository and notify you and say, hey, Peter, like you're checking out this analytics, you can see that there's a drop in X metric. We see some support tickets that have come into Avrio because of that. And so really to be able to connect the mixed methods in terms of qualitative and quantitative data through the platform. And yeah, I mean, it's an exciting future that we see for the product. And we have loads of different ideas, but really at this point, it's about working as close as possible with customers and just iterating from here.
Yeah. Well, hey, that roadmap sounds fantastic. Sounds like you're going to have some really intelligent kind of features, raising awareness for the things that matter that founders might miss or teams might not be aware of yet. So sounds really exciting. Best wishes with building those features and all your plans. For anyone listening, how can they follow what you're doing and also check out Avrio too?
Yeah, so obviously you can check out Avrio at avrio.com. It's avrio.com. And if you're interested as well in the podcast, as you mentioned, same, it's like churn.fm is the domain. We have a weekly episode every single Wednesday. We're coming up on the 3-year anniversary. Haven't skipped a beat yet, so don't plan on stopping anytime soon with that. And always like happy to hear from anybody. Obviously in this group, we can have a chat. And if there's any other questions following up, and feel free as well to connect either on Facebook or LinkedIn, Twitter, wherever. I'm available.
Excellent. Well, fantastic. Thanks again for joining us today, Andrew.
Thanks, Peter. It was great having you. Great having you. I'm so used to saying it's great having you on the show.
Of course.
I end every podcast.
On your podcast. Yeah. You're not. Yeah. I guess it's more rare for you to be a guest. Okay.
Absolutely.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Thanks a lot, Peter. Cheers.